All right, guys. So there is now a war between Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida and Disney. So I'm going to walk you through this, and this is interesting. There's a lot of twists and turns in this that make it not what it appears at face value. So let me just say, my gut reaction when I heard that, hey, Ron DeSantis is taking away Disney's special tax status, my gut reaction was like, that's sort of based. And the reason I think that is because so many giant corporations are, keep it real, welfare queens. Like, they have endless amounts of tax subsidies. And so really what they're doing is effectively shaking down taxpayers. And I'm not in favor of socialism for corporations. I would be in favor of money and subsidies and universal programs for working people. So first I saw this, I was like, a Republican going after a corporation? Well, that's awesome. But he's actually not going after Disney. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but bear with me. I'll prove it to you. I'll show you exactly how this tax thing is going to work. And it doesn't fall on the people who you think it falls on. It doesn't fall on the corporation. So New York Times here says, breaking news, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida revoked Disney special tax status, a move widely seen as retaliation for the company's opposition to what critics have called the Don't Say Gay law. So now, the Don't Say Gay law, that's what it's called by critics. I've gone over the law with you guys in detail on the show. There was a previous version of the law that basically forced teachers to out children to their parents. Now, that's such a horrific idea that eventually that was dropped from the law. But the law, look, I think it's kind of intentionally very vague. Like, they don't want to teach kids anything about, sex or identity or anything like that. But it's so vague that, Crystal made a good point about this. She was like, well, what if you have a gay teacher who just has a picture of them and their significant other on the desk at school? Like, is that not allowed? That seems a little extreme. So, look, I think the idea behind this is an attempt to re-stigmatize not just gay issues, but also, certainly trans issues, which are now a lot more front and center than they ever were previously. So now they frame it as no, we just don't want our kids being propagandized into this gender ideology, this extreme gender ideology. But then the question also arises, first question is, at what age is it appropriate to teach kids that this stuff exists? And the other thing is, I think their assumption is that, they're trying to indoctrinate kids otherwise straight kids into being gay or being trans. And that strikes me as incredibly conspiratorial. I'm sure there's some weird teachers out there who might do something akin to that, but the overwhelming majority of the time, teachers are just teachers, whether they're trans or gay or whatever. And at what age is it appropriate to say, hey, there are people who are, born biologically male or biologically female, and their gender perception lines up with that completely. There are people who are born biologically male or biologically female, and they feel like the other thing. That's what we call transgender. Now, most people tend to like members of the opposite sex, but there are plenty of people who like members of the same sex. Are you not even allowed to say things in a dry, factual manner? I don't know, because again, the law is vague. It just strikes me as an attempt to re-stigmatize various LGBTQ plus issues. So, now, Disney came out and they didn't agree with the law. I don't know what their exact comment was, but they don't agree with the law. Now, why does Disney not agree with the law? Well, very simply, look, corporations have an incentive to not be super socially conservative because they want to serve everybody. They want to make money from everybody, whether it's straight people, gay people, trans people, people of different ethnicities and backgrounds and religions and ideologies and creeds. That's what corporations do. They don't want to alienate anybody. So, they disagreed with the law, and they made that known in one way or another. And Ron DeSantis decided, well, now I'm going to go after you as a result of that. So, now let me tell you what really happens with this law, because this is the classic, using the culture war to do a sleight of hand trick. Because it'd be one thing if he was using the culture war to just take away corporate subsidies from a giant corporation. Because then I say, that's a good ending birthed in an impure way. But that's not even what's happening here. So there's this great thread. Nick Papantonis who's from WFTV, which is an Orlando-based news outlet. And he says there's a lot of misinformation and confusion about what the end of Disney's Reedy Creek District means for the company and for taxpayers. Here's what I know after talking to lobbyists, lawyers, and tax officials. For those of you who haven't heard, Reedy Creek is the special tax district of Walt Disney World. It essentially is its own city. Disney pays taxes to Reedy Creek, which operates a fire department, planning department, sewer treatment plant, and public works department. On the other hand, Disney controls Reedy Creek, which means if they want to build a new hotel or highway, they just have to ask themselves for permission. The biggest loss for Disney is the end of that control. So they have their own little, private city that they directly control everything, basically. It's a lot easier to ask yourself for permission than to go to the county. While they already follow all laws and building codes, and they'll still get everything they want, it's going to slow the process down for them. So now they can't just do something as soon as they want to do it. There's a little bit of a process, might take a couple months or whatever in order to get the green light. Potholes might develop on roads that they no longer pave themselves. They can't just call a meeting or alter their comprehensive plan on a random Friday. They also can't quickly finance new public projects like a fire station. The bigger issue for everyone else is the tax revenue. Disney already pays the same local property taxes as every other landowner. Reedy Creek added its own tax on top of that to pay for its projects. That tax, $163 million per year, is illegal outside of the district. When Reedy Creek goes away, that tax goes away, and Orange and Osceola counties can't do anything to get it back. However, the counties will now be responsible for all of the services Reedy Creek provides and all of the debt it has accumulated. They can't raise sales taxes or impact fees, so the counties will have to raise property taxes. They must tax every property equally, not just Disney, and therefore it's expected that property taxes in Orange County will rise as much as 25% next June. Osceola, much smaller and less wealthy, is still working on its figures, but it's going to be a hit to them as well. Many of that county's residents work for Disney or have jobs derived from Walt Disney World. They'll be paying their employers' taxes now. Lawyers largely agree that the state followed all the laws while doing this. They agree Disney may sue, but probably doesn't have much ground to stand on. Some believe a vote of residents or delegates from the district is required to make this legal. That doesn't appear to be the case here because a vote was never held to implement the district 55 years ago. Essentially, Disney will lose some control of its property and get a $163 million per year tax break and $1 billion of debt passed on to taxpayers. Some things will be negotiated. Disney still controls Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista, two actual towns within RCID. Lawmakers might backtrack from this plan during the next session. Now they're realizing what they've done. However, aside from maybe taking away the company's ability to build a nuclear plant, we have yet to hear how this benefits Florida and especially the local residents in any way. The residents, by the way, had no say in this vote, no say in their property taxes going through the roof, and no desire to have their communities staring at financial ruin. There is the question of whether the county can raise property taxes by 25%, well above the 10% or 3% cap the state imposes. If not, that likely means budget cuts unless the state steps in. I'm following up on this. Then he says, answer, the cap is only on the assessed value of the home. The county would pass a 25% increase as a millage rate. Okay, so there you go. So that's the breakdown from somebody in Florida who's looked into this in every way imaginable. So, I mean, look at what's happening here. Ron DeSantis is using a culture war issue, not to crack down on a woke corporation. He's actually effectively raising taxes of regular people who live in and around Disney. So, I mean, the clearest takeaway from this is, as I always tell you guys, whenever Republicans talk about how they're in favor of tax cuts, you always have to look at the actual plans. Because when you look at the actual plans, you see they only really want tax cuts for the top 1%, sometimes the top 5%, and sometimes the top 10%. But it's always the top. It's always the top. They want to keep taxes the same or even raise taxes on everybody else. That's why that Rick Scott plan came out, where he basically said 47% of the country doesn't pay taxes. They need to have some skin in the game, so we want to raise their taxes. That's the bottom 47%, who doesn't really make any money, so they can't afford federal taxes. He's like, those are the people we want to raise taxes on. Look at what Ron DeSantis is doing here. Posturing like, I'm going after Disney because it's a woke corporation, but in reality, they're just effectively shifting the tax burden onto the people who live in and around Disney and jacking their taxes up massively, all because of a political culture war disagreement between the corporation and Ron DeSantis. So this is like some political vengeance shit that has horrendous consequences for these people who have nothing to do with it one way or the other. I mean, it really is stunning. Now, of course, the other aspect of this is, I mean, in and around the area, of course, in most big cities, most very populated areas, in and around the area, what are the politics, generally, of those people? They're more Democratic leaning. That's what it is. When you look at big cities, they overwhelmingly lean left on the political spectrum. So this is kind of like a bait and switch where he's going after mostly blue voters and raising their taxes. So that's what's really going on here. And honestly, none of it should have been happening. There should have never been the Don't Say Gay bill. There should have never been, therefore there would have been no reason for Disney to comment in any way, shape, or form. There would have been no backlash from Ron DeSantis, which largely targets regular people and not Disney. And here we are. I mean, this is the culture war scrambling brains to the max and leading to real-world, terrible economic consequences. So, I mean, I feel bad for these people who, many of them probably are not even going to be able to afford to live there anymore if this goes through. I mean, let's hope that, you have a situation where lawmakers can roll this back or alleviate the tax burden in one way or another. If this was actually just raising taxes on Disney or taking away some sort of special subsidy they have, I would support it as a matter of principle. But that's not really what's happening. That's not really what's happening at all. And so, Ron DeSantis, he's also showing, he's showing that he enjoys political vengeance, which, by the way, reminds me a little bit of Donald Trump as well. And so, don't get it twisted. These guys are not populists. These guys are standard establishment Republicans who are actually mired deeply in the culture war. In fact, Trump said that the other day in a speech. He was like, the way to end the culture war is to win it decisively. He said something like that. So in other words, he's not sort of opting out of the culture war and saying this stuff is stupid and it's a distraction. He's saying, no, I love the culture war and I'm going to dive in it and I'm going to win for the right and win for social conservatism. And this is what's going on here with Ron DeSantis as well. So culture war scrambles brains, man. And now it's leading to real world economic consequences. And I feel really bad for the people who are going to get hosed as a result of it. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.